I've been told that people carry different anchors in life. For some, it's a photograph, a house, a childhood toy. For me, it was always a car. Not just any car, but the one I saw for the first time when I was 7 years old, standing in my grandfather's garage. Back then, Saturday mornings weren't about cartoons or playdates. They were about Grease, the low hum of an old radio, and the smell of motor oil clinging to everything. My grandfather was a quiet man, not one for big speeches, but he taught by doing. He would hand me a wrench almost too big for my hand, and without a word, guide me through loosening a bolt or changing a filter. That was how I learned. By watching, by trying, by failing, and by starting again. The day he pulled back the tarp to show me the 1969 Corvette Stingray, I stopped breathing. It wasn't just the shine of the red paint or the perfect sweep of its curves. It was the way he looked at it, like it was alive, like it carried meaning far beyond its frame. He crouched next to me and whispered, "Machines have souls if you listen long enough." At that age, I believed him completely. I whispered to myself quietly, a vow. One day I'll have one just like this. My parents didn't see it the same way. They called my obsession unfeminine. My mother sighed when she caught me wiping grease from under my fingernails, as though I had done something shameful. My father mostly stayed silent, but his silence always carried the same message: disappointment. When my younger sister wanted dance lessons, the money appeared. When I asked for auto shop classes, the answer was no. That's just how it was. Still, I held on to that promise. It became my compass. While Heather got new clothes and parties, I saved. While she took vacations, I worked part-time jobs. The imbalance never surprised me, it just fueled me. If no one else would believe in my dream, then I would. Through college, I worked 3 jobs at a time: waitressing, tutoring, temp work. My GPA stayed perfect because I couldn't afford to let it slip. Every hour I worked, every dollar I saved felt like a step toward that car. My friends spent summers traveling. I spent mine hunched over spreadsheets and coffee-stained notebooks, tracking every cent. I wasn't bitter, at least not at first. I just knew this was the price of independence. After graduation, I landed a position at an investment bank in Chicago. The hours were brutal, 70-hour weeks, sometimes more. I didn't complain. I brown-bagged my lunches, shared a cramped apartment with roommates, and said no to every indulgence. My colleagues splurged on vacations and designer watches. I stared at photos of Corvettes on auction websites, calculating how long it would take until one of them could be mine. 5 years passed like that. Sacrifice became normal, almost comfortable. And then one night, after months of searching, I found it. A listing from a collector in Wisconsin. A 1969 Corvette Stingray, rally red, in near-perfect condition. The price was $85,000. The exact number I had saved down to the cent. It felt like fate. The day I drove it home, my hands shook on the wheel. I felt my grandfather in the passenger seat, as though his approval had followed me all those years and landed in that moment. "We did it, Grandpa," I whispered through tears. The roar of the engine wasn't just sound. It was memory, it was victory, it was proof. That car became more than metal, more than rubber and glass. It was a declaration. Proof that years of being dismissed, of being told no, of being made to feel less had not broken me. Proof that discipline and quiet resilience could turn into something beautiful. When people asked me why I loved it so much, I never gave the full answer. I just said, "It reminds me of my grandfather." But in truth, it reminded me of everything. Every late night spent studying, every morning spent working while others slept, every time I bit my tongue when my parents favored my sister. It reminded me that self-worth can be built, not given. James, my boyfriend, understood that in a way no one else did. We met at a classic car show not long after I bought the Stingray. He owned a replica, and at first that was enough to get us talking. But over time it became more. He didn't mock my passion, didn't dismiss the hours I spent tinkering under the hood. He respected it. He respected me. For 2 years that car was my ritual. I drove it only on clear days, never in the rain. I polished it myself, stored it properly in winter, protected it the way you would something sacred. And in truth it was sacred. It was a piece of my grandfather. It was the clearest symbol of my independence. I never imagined it could be taken from me. I thought foolishly that once you earned something with your whole heart, it was safe. I thought love and hard work built walls that no one could cross. But family has a way of crossing lines you never think they will. At that stage, I still believed the car was untouchable. I still believed my parents might not understand me, but at least they respected boundaries. I had no idea how fragile it all really was. The Stingray wasn't just a dream realized. It was a boundary line, the one thing in my life that felt unshakably mine. And for a time I believed that would be enough. I had always believed that certain things were sacred, even in complicated families. You could disagree about choices, argue about values, even carry years of unresolved tension, but you didn't cross boundaries when something was deeply personal. I thought my Corvette was one of those things. I was wrong. The call came in the middle of a Tuesday, the kind that starts like any other and suddenly shifts your life. My boss asked me to step into her office and with a straight face, told me I was being sent to Tokyo. It was the kind of opportunity you don't prepare for because you can't. A 3-week assignment that could change my career. I remember nodding, feeling both honored and terrified, and walking back to my desk with my heart racing. The first thought in my head wasn't the hotel or the presentation or even the client. It was my car. 3 weeks was a long time to be away. Chicago's winters weren't kind to cars, and the neighborhood had been dealing with a string of break-ins. I couldn't shake the image of coming home to shattered glass and an empty space where my Stingray had been. James and I discussed options that night. His replica looked so close to mine that most people couldn't tell the difference. "I can swap it in," he offered. "Keep yours in my garage while you're away. No one will ever know." The idea made sense, but I still worried. My parents had a large garage in the suburbs, quiet neighborhood, plenty of space. Maybe safer there, I reasoned out loud. If anyone's going to respect it, it should be them. So I drove to their house the night before my flight. My dad was mowing the lawn when I pulled up, and for a moment I saw his eyes soften as he looked at the Corvette. He ran a hand along the hood and said, "Still a beauty. Your grandfather would be proud." Those words meant something to me even if they were brief. My mom came out too, asking questions about the trip, offering dinner, acting like nothing had ever been strained between us. I parked the car in their garage, laying out instructions as if I were handing them a fragile piece of myself. "Start it once a week. Let it run for 15 minutes. Don't drive it. Use this cover." My dad bristled a little, saying he knew how to take care of a car, but I didn't apologize. It wasn't about doubting his knowledge. It was about protecting the one thing I couldn't lose. That evening Heather came over. She had just started a job she didn't like and spent most of dinner complaining about stress and unfair bosses. I listened quietly as always until she sighed dramatically and said, "Everyone's going on a cruise to the Mediterranean next month. I can't afford it. I'll be the only one left behind." My mom reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "We'll see what we can do," she promised. I stayed silent, biting back the reminder that when I needed money at her age, no one had seen what they could do. Still, I left that night thinking at least my car was safe. James came by the next day and swapped his replica for mine just as we'd planned. To anyone else it looked like the same car. To me it was peace of mind. I boarded my flight to Tokyo believing everything was under control. 3 weeks in Japan passed in a blur of meetings and long nights. I called home when I could and my parents always reassured me, "Everything's fine, don't worry." Toward the end my mom texted, "We have a big surprise for you when you come back." I assumed it meant dinner, maybe a small family gesture. Nothing more. The truth was I trusted them. Despite the years of favoritism, despite the way they always treated Heather like porcelain and me like steel, I trusted them. That was my mistake. Looking back, I realized that boundaries aren't as solid as we think. They exist only if everyone respects them. I thought the weight of my sacrifice, the years of work, the meaning behind that car would be obvious. I thought even my parents, with all their blind spots, would never cross that line. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who blur boundaries first. On that flight home I was already imagining the first drive I'd take with the Stingray, the way the lake air would feel rushing through the windows. I didn't know that by the time the wheels touched down, the boundary I had thought unshakable would already be gone. The taxi pulled into my parents' driveway on a warm Tuesday afternoon. I remember the air being sharp and bright, the kind of weather that makes you want to roll down the windows and drive for hours. Instead, I stepped out of the cab with my suitcase, paid the driver and turned toward the garage. The door was open. Inside sat my father's sedan, my mother's SUV. But the space where my Corvette should have been was empty. At first I thought it had been moved. Maybe my dad had parked it somewhere else, maybe they'd closed it up tight for safety. But as I walked closer, the truth pressed heavier on my chest. The cover I had given him, the custom-fitted one I had carefully folded, was gone too. I wheeled my suitcase up the drive, rang the bell and tried to steady my breath. My mom opened the door with a smile, pulling me into a hug. Welcome home, sweetheart. How was your flight? I didn't return the smile. Where's my car? For a second her expression faltered. Just a flicker, a shadow. Then she turned back toward the kitchen. Come inside, let's get you something to eat. My dad was in his recliner, a newspaper spread across his lap. He looked up, his smile too quick, too rehearsed. Hey honey, how was Tokyo? Where's the Corvette? I asked again, louder this time. He cleared his throat, glanced at Mom, then set the paper aside. Well, something came up while you were gone. The knot in my stomach tightened. What does that mean? Where is it? My mom finally turned, her chin lifting the way it always did when she was about to defend herself. Heather needed some help. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Thanks to your car, she's having the time of her life. I stared at her, not understanding. You sold it. Her smile widened, but it wasn't kind. It was sharp, almost triumphant. She pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward me. Heather's Instagram feed filled the display. My sister posing on the deck of a cruise ship, drink in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose, the Mediterranean Sea stretching out behind her. You sold my car, I whispered. Now Vanessa, my dad started, his voice placating. Try to understand. Heather's been going through a tough time. All her friends were going and she would have been left out. It would have crushed her. The heat rose in my face. So you sold my car. You can always buy another one, my mom said flatly. You make good money. Heather needed this more than you needed that car. She needed to network, to make connections. I felt my hands shaking. That car was in my name. You had no right. They exchanged a glance. My dad's voice grew quieter. We told the buyer you had authorized us. We handled the paperwork. My throat felt tight. Do you have any idea what that car meant to me? It wasn't just a car. It was my grandfather. It was years of sacrifice. It was mine. Don't be so dramatic, my mom scoffed. It's just a thing. Family matters more. Heather is your sister. She needed this. And I don't matter? The words came out louder than I intended, my voice breaking. My boundaries, my work, my sacrifices, none of that counts? You've always been so materialistic, she snapped. So focused on things. Heather struggles in ways you don't. She's sensitive. I laughed, the sound harsh, empty. Sensitive? I worked 70-hour weeks for 5 years to buy that car. Did you ever once sell anything of yours to make my life easier? That's different, she said quickly. You've always been the strong one. The double standard was suffocating. I could see it so clearly in that moment. Years of it, decades of it. Heather got help, protection, indulgence. I got resilience. And now they had taken the one thing I thought they could never touch. I steadied myself enough to ask, how much did you sell it for? Another glance passed between them. My dad hesitated, then said, 50,000. I gasped. 50? That car was worth 85. Did you even check? The buyer said it was a fair price, he mumbled. We needed to move quickly before you came home. That broke something in me. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had rushed to do it, eager to finish before I could stop them. Who did you sell it to? I asked, my voice shaking. Some collector from Indiana, my mom said vaguely. I don't remember his name. My phone buzzed in my hand. A message from James, just pulled up. Where's the Stingray? For a moment my anger paused. The words blurred, then sharpened into something else. A memory I had pushed aside when I first saw the empty garage. A plan James and I had made. My laugh startled both of them. It started small, then grew louder, almost uncontrollable. My mom's face hardened. What's so funny about your sister's happiness? I took a breath, steadying myself. You think you sold my car. But you didn't. Their faces shifted, confusion, disbelief, then the first flicker of fear. That was the moment the power began to turn. The silence after I said those words hung in the room like a weight. My father blinked at me, confused. My mother narrowed her eyes as if waiting for me to admit it was some kind of joke. But I didn't flinch. You didn't sell my car, I said again, calmer this time. You sold James's replica. My dad frowned. What are you talking about? We saw you drive it here. We parked it in the garage ourselves. I nodded. That's what you thought. But the day after I left, James came by. He swapped his replica for mine. To protect the real Stingray. To anyone else they look identical. But only one is authentic. The color drained from my mother's face. She sank into a chair, gripping the table as if the ground had shifted beneath her. My father stared at me, his mouth opening and closing without words. James stepped inside then, his presence steady, his jaw tight. He had heard enough to know. You didn't just betray your daughter, he said evenly. You stole my property. The room went still. My parents looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. My dad's voice trembled. It was a mistake. We thought it was hers. That doesn't matter, James replied. The paperwork you forged. The signatures. The VIN number that doesn't even match. Those aren't mistakes. Those are crimes. My mom pressed her hands to her face. Oh my God. What have we done? I didn't rush to comfort her. I had done that too many times before. Instead, I stood there watching them absorb the weight of their choices. You've committed fraud, I said quietly. You forged my name. You lied to a buyer. You sold something that wasn't yours to sell. Do you understand what that means? My father looked older in that moment, his shoulders sagging under invisible weight. We could go to jail, he whispered. James nodded. Yes. Grand theft, auto, wire fraud, forgery. Each carries real sentences. Ignorance isn't a defense. For the first time my parents' certainty cracked. The bravado, the dismissive tone. Gone. What replaced it was raw fear. My mom's tears came fast, loud, almost theatrical. They would have once pulled at me, made me step forward, made me soften. But not now. How are we supposed to know? She sobbed. You tricked us. I shook my head. No. I protected myself. Because somewhere deep down I knew you couldn't be trusted with something this important. And I was right. My father's hands trembled as he reached for me. Please, Vanessa. Help us fix this. We can't go to jail. We didn't mean. You meant to. I cut him off. Not to commit a crime maybe. But you meant to take what wasn't yours. You meant to prioritize Heather again over me. You meant to decide what I could live without so she could have more. They said nothing. Because they knew it was true. At that moment my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said to answer. Is this Vanessa Miller? A man's voice asked. Yes. This is Peter Donovan. I recently purchased a 1969 Corvette Stingray from your parents. There's a problem with the title transfer. I closed my eyes, the weight of his words pressing down. I see, I said carefully. Can I call you back within the hour? There are details we need to clarify. Of course, he replied. When I hung up, I looked back at my parents. Their fear was no longer abstract. It was real, standing in front of them in the form of a buyer who would soon discover the fraud. That was him, I said. Your buyer. He already knows something is wrong. My mom's hands shook as she whispered, What do we do? I looked at James. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. First, he said, you tell us everything. Who you sold it to. How much you took. Every document you forged. Then maybe we find a way to keep you out of prison. My father nodded quickly, fumbling for a folder from the desk drawer. He handed it over with trembling hands. I flipped through the papers. Fake bills of sale, signatures that didn't match, a VIN number altered by a single digit. It was sloppier than I expected, almost desperate. You didn't even bother to check the details, James muttered. You just wanted the money fast. We thought it was enough, my dad whispered. We thought family would understand. I met his eyes, holding them steady. Family doesn't mean taking whatever you want. It doesn't mean boundaries don't exist. What you did wasn't family. It was theft. For a long time no one spoke. The only sound was my mother's uneven breathing. And in that silence, something shifted inside me. I realized I had power now. Not the loud kind, not the kind that comes from shouting or threats. But the quiet kind that comes when truth is undeniable. They had betrayed me and now they were the ones afraid. I could destroy them with one phone call. Or I could use this moment to force something else. Accountability, change, maybe even the beginning of respect. Either way, things would never go back to how they were. And for the first time in years I was okay with that. The days that followed were a blur of tense conversations, paperwork, and phone calls that felt more like negotiations than family discussions. Nothing was simple anymore. Every word carried weight. Every silence carried more. James and I met with Peter Donovan first. We sat across from him at a small coffee shop halfway between Chicago and Indianapolis, and I watched his jaw tighten as we laid out the truth. He had bought a stolen car. The documents were forged. The signatures weren't mine. Are you telling me, he said slowly, his eyes sharp, that I spent $50,000 on a car that wasn't even yours to sell? James kept his tone steady. Yes. And we intend to make it right. You'll get your money back, plus compensation for the trouble. Donovan leaned back, shaking his head. I already added it to my insurance. I've spent money on registration. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's fraud. I spoke carefully. We know. And we're not asking you to excuse it. We're asking you to allow us the chance to resolve it privately. No courts, no charges. Just restitution. He studied me for a long moment. Finally he nodded. I'll agree. But I want every cent back. $55,000. Wired to my account before I release the car. It was fair. Brutal but fair. When we told my parents, relief washed over their faces first, followed quickly by dread. 55,000? My mother repeated, her voice cracking. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money? You mentioned a home equity loan. I reminded them. Or you sell investments. Or jewelry. Figure it out. This isn't optional. My father's voice was small. We can maybe manage 40. But not more. Not enough, James said firmly. All of it or the deal falls apart. And if it does, Mr. Donovan won't be the only one you'll be answering to. For the first time, Heather was pulled directly into the conversation. James turned toward her and said, You benefited from this. You'll contribute too. Her face flushed. Why am I being punished? I didn't sell the car. No, I said quietly. You just complained until they solved your problem at my expense. You wanted the cruise. You got it. Now you'll pay for it. She glared at me, but there was no defense left. For once our parents didn't shield her. My father sighed heavily and said, She's right, Heather. This is yours as much as ours. The negotiations lasted days. My parents met with their bank, sold pieces of jewelry, argued late into the night. Heather wired $10,000 from her savings, though she did it with resentment sharp in her eyes. My mother sold rings she had once flaunted proudly. My father picked up a weekend construction job to make loan payments possible. Watching them scramble was strange. 4 years, I had been the one stretching every dollar, sacrificing, working while they invested in Heather's comfort. Now the roles were reversed. Now they were the ones being pressed, stripped of ease, forced into responsibility. Still, it wasn't money alone that mattered to James. He insisted on something more permanent. A notarized letter. An apology in writing, signed by both of them, admitting what they had done and promising never to interfere with my property or his again. My mother resisted at first. It's humiliating, she whispered. Not as humiliating as prison, James replied. His voice left no room for debate. In the end they signed it. Their hands shook as they held the pen, the silence in the lawyer's office heavy with shame. I didn't revel in it, but I didn't soften either. They needed to feel the weight of consequence. Heather too was changed by it, though not immediately. She sulked, avoided eye contact, complained about the loss of her savings. But cracks began to show. She started her new job with less entitlement, arriving early, leaving late. Maybe for the first time she saw that her choices had costs. For me, the hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was the quiet moments when I realized just how deep the betrayal had gone. Lying awake at night, I replayed the scene of my mother sneering, "It's just a car." The words cut more than the sale itself. They had taken what I loved most and dismissed it as nothing because in their eyes, my boundaries had always been nothing. Yet here we were with the balance shifting. They were being forced to respect limits, to admit fault, to pay back what they had stolen. One evening, after another long day of meetings, James and I sat in his apartment, takeout containers spread across the table. He looked at me and asked quietly, "Do you think this will change them?" I thought about it. About my father's weary eyes, my mother's silence, Heather's new hesitation. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know it's changing me. I can't go back to being the one they step over. That part of me is gone." James reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "Then maybe that's enough." In the weeks that followed, the money was repaid. Donovan got his refund plus his compensation. James's car was returned undamaged, the paperwork undone. My Corvette, untouched in his garage, waited for me as though none of it had happened. But it had happened. And nothing would be the same again. The car was back. The money was settled. But the real repairs were still beginning. A month after everything unraveled, I found myself back at my parents' dining table. The food was the same as always, but the air felt different. Thicker, quieter, carrying the weight of everything we had said and done. My father passed a platter of grilled chicken, his hands rougher than before. He had taken extra work to cover the loan, and it showed. My mother brought out salad, her fingers bare of the jewelry she once wore proudly. Heather arrived late, dressed in office clothes instead of cruise attire, her smile smaller, less certain. It wasn't the family I grew up with. It was something else. Unsteady, fractured but trying. James sat beside me, his presence both a shield and a reminder. He was invited this time, not as an outsider but as someone my parents finally acknowledged mattered. They had learned the hard way that hurting him meant hurting me. Conversation started cautiously. Small talk about weather, neighbors, things that couldn't wound. But then it shifted. My father cleared his throat. "I spoke with Uncle George," he said quietly. "He's selling his old pickup. I was thinking, maybe I could buy it. Fix it up. I know it's not a Corvette, but maybe you could show me a few things." I looked at him surprised. For years he had treated my passion as a flaw. Now he was asking to learn from it. "I'd like that," I said and meant it. My mother watched us and for once didn't interrupt. She had been different since everything. Softer. At the end of the night she pulled me aside in the hallway. Her voice was low, her eyes clearer than I remembered. "I know I've said I'm sorry. But I need you to hear it again. Not just for the car. For all the times I dismissed you. For treating you like strength meant you didn't need care." I held her gaze, searching for cracks, waiting for the usual defensiveness. But it wasn't there. Just regret. "Forgiveness isn't a switch," I told her. "It's a process. I'm working on it." She nodded, accepting that. It was the most honest moment we'd shared in years. Heather was harder to read. She sat through dinner quietly, helped clear the table without being asked, even asked about my work. It wasn't much, but it was more than before. When she said she was proud of my promotion, her voice carried no resentment. For once it sounded real. Driving home that night, James glanced at me. "Feels different, doesn't it?" "Yes," I said, watching the city lights blur past. "Not fixed. But different." Later that week I took the Corvette out. The same stretch of road by the lake. The engine's purr wrapping around me like an old song. The car hadn't changed, but I had. Before it had been proof of my worth. Now it was something else. A reminder that boundaries matter. That love without respect isn't love at all. That family can wound you, but it doesn't mean you have to hand them the knife. I thought about everything. The betrayal, the fear in my parents' eyes when the truth came out, the slow, painful process of restitution. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been clean. But it had forced change. For them maybe. But definitely for me. I understood now that saying no wasn't cruelty. It was survival. That drawing a line didn't make me selfish. It made me whole. My parents had taken the one thing I thought was untouchable, and in doing so they gave me something else. Clarity. As the sun dropped over the water and the wind whipped through the windows, I whispered what I had once promised my grandfather. We did it. But this time I wasn't just talking about the car. I was talking about the strength to stand firm even against family. The road stretched ahead, uncertain, imperfect, but mine. And that, more than any car, was the truest proof of worth I could ever hold. That's it for today. Subscribe for more and drop your country's name in the comments.